Hello and welcome to News Central Television. I am Likon Obanjo. Here are some stories making rounds beyond the continent. We begin the news in the U.S., where the White House has announced it is halting key weapons shipments to Ukraine, a move that could significantly impact the war effort against Russia. The Biden-era military support is now being reassessed under President Donald Trump's administration, coming at a time Ukraine is accusing North Korea of planning to send as many as 30,000 troops to bolster Russia's forces. International correspondent Afia Hagen has more.
Today, a blow to Ukraine's battlefield prospects. The White House says it is pausing key weapons deliveries, including Patriot missile systems, precision artillery, and Hellfire missiles, as part of a sweeping Pentagon review. White House Deputy Press Secretary Anna Kelly said the move is about putting America's interests first, citing depleted stockpiles and shifting global priorities. The decision comes as Ukraine faces one of the heaviest waves of Russian missile and drone attacks in the three-year-old war. In the past 24 hours alone, drone strikes killed civilians in Ukraine's Kharkiv region, and Kyiv has responded with deep strikes inside Russian territory. Critics warn the weapons pause could weaken Ukraine's defences. Former US Ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, called the decision disgusting and embarrassing. At last week's NATO summit, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky pressed Trump for more Patriot missiles, but received only a vague answer. Meanwhile, analysts say Russia has dramatically increased its aerial attacks, and despite spending over $64 billion on defence this year, Ukraine remains heavily reliant on US and European aid. As President Trump redirects focus to global hotspots like Gaza and Iran, questions are growing about what role the US will continue to play in Ukraine's defence, and what message this shift sends to allies around the world. The Pentagon has not directly commented on the halted shipments, but insists US forces remain fully capable. As Ukraine's needs grow more urgent, the impact of this pause will be closely watched across NATO and beyond. For News Central, I'm Afia Hagen.
To discuss this further, I'm joined by Ejike Okpa, who is a global affairs analyst. Thank you so much, Ejike, for joining us on the news. Well, Russia and Ukraine are at a critical stage in the crisis that has plagued these two countries as of now. Now, U.S. is saying that it will be halting key weapons shipments. Is it the right thing to do at this time?
Thank you for having me, and a good question. Yes or no, depending on who is going to be responding to such a question. U.S. don't want to, do something that would trigger more war in that part of the world. If U.S. were to send more than what they have sent, it might be a war between U.S. and Russia, and that can just escalate, to a point that the entire region could be in a war. So U.S. said, we don't want to give you any more weapons. So far, what I have given you have helped you to do certain things, but it hasn't helped you to be decisive in going forward. There's always this phrase we use in America, the pathway to success. What is that? You can give all the weapons you want to Ukraine, and Ukraine is still not going to do it because Russia is very adamant as to what they want to do. They don't want NATO. If NATO were to get into Ukraine, that is a full-scale war because, it's a proximity issue. It's just like, if a country that is very anti-America were to go and be in Canada or in Mexico, America ain't going to take likely to it. So everybody's been sensitive to regional cooperation and support. So I think it's to the Ukraine interest to sit down and negotiate a peaceful coexistence. You keep what you have gotten, but you're not going to get any more. The land, remember when Obama was there, Crimea was taken and Obama didn't do anything. So, but NATO, it doesn't have any strength without America because, all the member nations have been a socialist country. Their defense budget hasn't produced weapons that actually make a difference for Ukraine.
But a lot of people will say Russia started this war and should be the one to halt its offensive against Ukraine?
Well, again, there's a phrase in Igbo language that say when somebody sees who they can beat up, they always, have a hunger for war. And that's what Russia has said. I mean, I feel it. They know, okay, every other former USSR member nations are not antagonizing Russia. It's only Ukraine that has that potential. And Russia said, you know what, we just got to go and do what we want to do and then see what happens. And that's what they have done. It is Russia believes that, America cannot risk a war with Russia and NATO doesn't have a hold of anything to support Ukraine. That's what we're going to do, go back and forth. Give you a little gun here to go fight somebody who has AK-47. What's that going to do for you? It is up to you, the country that you're already weakened, to say, okay, fine. Hey, what do we do here? Okay, you've taken some of my land, I can get it back. Don't take any more. Let's get into an agreement. And in an earlier program on your channel, I had talked about how Texas and Mexico had a war, and Texas took something from Mexico, and Mexico said give it back, and Texas said no. That's why we have a phrase say, come and take it. You can Google that and see what it means. And Texas told Mexico, come and take it. We took it, but you come take it. And then Mexico never showed up. So that's what happens when somebody sees who they're going to beat up. They will have a hunger for war. And it's unfortunate, but that's just human nature.
Okay, so now how might this policy reversal affect Ukraine's ability to sustain its defense against Russia, knowing fully well that Europe can only do so little in terms of support?
Well, what it's going to do is up to Ukraine leadership and their population. I mean, there was a survey that came out some months ago. A lot of Ukrainians don't want the war. But, you got the president who's out there running around the whole world, pleading. Obviously, he doesn't have a chemistry with Trump. We saw what happened when he went to the Oval Office. Under Biden, he thought he had something going on. But, Biden was what Biden was. So now it's a new day. There's a new sheriff in town, and that's President Trump. And he's just going to do what he wants to do. And if what he wants to do doesn't agree with Ukraine, like we say in America, tough luck. So Ukraine has to make a decision. They have to make a decision to say, hey, we don't want this. We have suffered. I think they say they spent $64 billion, fighting this war. How much more are they going to spend in order to have a pathway to success? It's up in the air.
So now, how would you react to the story about the claims coming from Ukraine whereby North Korea seems to be potentially sending about 30,000 troops to support Russia, and what that would even mean in terms of global security dynamics?
North Korea, who goes there? Who cares about North Korea? I mean, the 30,000 people they're going to send are going to be slaughtered. I think, they sent some people a year or so ago, and they came back in body bags. So I don't want to put any weight on what North Korea is doing, because, it's like a child, that is overlooked in the corner and they're screaming, hey, I'm here. They want to get an attention. North Korea don't have any military might or fighting force, even though they say, oh, we're going to do missiles, we can send it anywhere. The reason they do what they do is because of proximity to Russia, and they want to be, a nuisance partner or friend to China. Other than that, who cares about North Korea? So there's nothing. We're not paying attention to North Korea. And there are 30,000 people, like I said, hey, unfortunately, they have a president that dictates, have no choice to say no. If you say go over there and die, they're going to go over there and die.
Thank you so much, Meji Kelpa, for sharing your thoughts with us on the news. Meanwhile, Sean Diddy Combs has been acquitted of the most serious charges in his federal criminal trial, including racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking. However, jurors found him guilty on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. The 55-year-old music mogul now faces up to 20 years in prison, 10 years for each count. Had he been convicted on the more serious charges, he could have faced a life sentence. Following the verdict, Combs has turned to the courtroom gallery and clapped as his family and friends erupted in applause. His defense team requested his release while he awaits sentencing, a move opposed by prosecutors. The judge said a decision will be made after formal arguments are submitted. And for more on this, I'm joined by our international correspondent, Afia Hagen. Afia, it's nice to have you around. Now, please talk to us through the verdict delivered against Sean Combs.
Yeah, so this verdict that we got today, we had a bit of anticipation about it yesterday, late yesterday, UK time, around sort of 8:30 to 9, when we were told that the jurors had come to a decision on 4 of the counts, but they had to go away and come to a definitive decision on the racketeering, on the RICO charge, a charge that's very hard to prove. The RICO law, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations law, is a law that was passed in 1970. And actually, it was about being able to prosecute huge groups like the mafia, organized crime enterprises and organizations. But that charge wasn't proven. It didn't stick to Diddy, so that was a racketeering charge he was found not guilty on. He was also found not guilty on sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, which pertained to Cassie, and the same charge that pertained to victim number 2, who was just known as Jane. However, he was found guilty on transportation to engage in prostitution pertaining to Cassie, and the same charge pertaining to Jane, who was that second witness that we had testimony from in the final weeks of P. Diddy's trial.
Very interesting. So then, what has been the reaction to the verdict?
Well, Cassie Ventura's lawyer put out a statement not long after the verdict was delivered, and he said that Cassie paved the way to a jury finding P. Diddy guilty on some of the counts against him. He also went on to say this entire criminal process started when our client, Cassie Ventura, had the courage to file her civil complaint in November 2023. Although the judge did not find Combs guilty of sex trafficking, Cassie, beyond a reasonable doubt, she paved the way for a jury to find him guilty of transportation to engage in prostitution. And he went on to talk about Ventura's courage throughout the trial and bringing attention to the realities of powerful men in our orbit and the misconduct that has persisted for decades without repercussion. A really, really strong statement there from Cassie's lawyers. And of course, this is blown up on social media, people talking about it, the discourse around, is it really a win for him? Is it a win for Cassie? He was found guilty of 2 out of 5 charges, something that hasn't happened, before. He hasn't been able to brought to trial on these charges before. It was because of Cassie's bravery as to why we're here in the first place. And so you think about the victims, you think about Cassie and think about Jane and wonder how they must be and what they must be feeling at this time. Clearly they must be pleased that at least 2 of the charges have resulted in him now being a convicted felon.
While we expect a final verdict from the judge, what happens now?
Well, we have the final verdict. We got the final verdict earlier on, and it was those 2 charges that I read out pertaining to transportation to engage in prostitution against Cassie and Jane. He's been convicted of those. So what we're actually waiting for now is a bail hearing. Now, that's happening in about a couple of hours' time. P. Diddy's lawyers have requested that he should be freed on bail until sentencing. Now, Cassie's lawyers have written a letter to the judge saying that they believe that P. Diddy is a danger to society, and also he could be a danger to the victims, to people who testified in the trial. When he was in prison, he was paying other prisoners to use their phones to call up potential witnesses and threaten them. And although his team said he has had exemplary behavior while he has been in jail, he has been in.
Hello, Afia. I think we just lost our connection with our international correspondent there, but then thank you so much for sharing the updates with us as regards this particular story. We appreciate that. Now, let's turn our attention to Europe, where French parliamentary inquiry has concluded that the state has failed to prevent and address abuse in schools following a major investigation into the Notre Dame d'Aubertram scandal. The commission presented 50 recommendations to support victims and strengthen measures to prevent, monitor, and punish abuse. Lawmakers have heard from 135 individuals, including survivors, and cited persistent violence across French schools. Former Education Minister Francois Bayrou was accused of inaction during his 1993 to 1997 tenure, with co-rapporteurs claiming abuse at Bertram continued due to his failure to intervene. Bayrou, however, denied wrongdoing and labeled the report a campaign of destruction. Despite growing pressure, including a recent no-confidence vote, he survived. The inquiry is not expected to refer the case to court. Meanwhile, the findings have added political strain to President Macron's government.
Cette défaillance majeure, c'est celle d'un État qui n'a pas assumé ses responsabilités pendant très longtemps, jusqu'à exposer des élèves à des violences terribles, les exposer aux crimes de groupes de criminels qui ont pu ravager des vies pendant des décennies parfois. Et donc face à cette situation, face à cette carence insupportable, inacceptable, nous appelons à une révolution dans des moyens du contrôle qu'il faut renforcer, conforter, clarifier. Et moi je constate que François Bayrou s'est parjuré devant notre commission d'enquête en prétendant avoir envisagé de porter plainte en diffamation contre le journal Mediapart le 11 février dernier, à propos d'un article qui a été publié le 12 mars. C'était donc impossible. À travers cette annonce de plainte en diffamation, François Bayrou, en vérité, menaçait les journalistes dans l'exercice de leur travail d'investigation, et a, à ce moment-là, manifesté sa volonté de maintenir une omerta autour de Betaram et autour, plus largement, de la question des violences commises par des adultes sur des élèves. C'est inacceptable et cela mérite, comme le cadre institutionnel le prévoit, des poursuites devant la...
Let's now go on a short break, and when we return, 8 dead as severe heat wave hits Spain, France, and Italy. We'll tell you more in a short while. Join us again. Bringing you the rest of the stories now, President Emmanuel Macron of France launched a summit in Paris on Wednesday, a year after deadly riots over voting reforms in New Caledonia. He's meeting separatists and loyalists leaders, economic stakeholders, and civil society to discuss the territory's political and economic future. Talks will focus on identity, autonomy, and nickel. The island holds 20 to 30% of the world's reserves. Macron pledged the summit will last as long as necessary, but critics question the format and whether real progress can be made. Still in Europe, UK markets plunged on Wednesday after Chancellor Rachel Reeves was seen visibly upset during Prime Minister's questions. The emotional moments followed a major U-turn on planned welfare cuts, undoing a £5 to £5.5 billion budget saving, prompting investors to question her future. The pound tumbled over 1%, or around 1.3589 in dollars anyway, and 10-year gilt yield surged to 4.68%, the steepest one-day rise since October 2022. Market analysts warn that a shift in fiscal leadership, particularly if Reeves were replaced, could further destabilize confidence. Downing Street assured that Reeves retains Prime Minister Starmer's support, stating the tears were due to a personal matter and no resignation is planned. And I'll tell you that the EU on Wednesday unveiled its long-delayed target for cutting greenhouse gas emissions by 2040, but with contested new flexibilities built in to win over the most skeptical member states. After months of tough negotiations, Brussels announced it would stick to the headline objective announced last year of cutting emissions by 90% in the year 2040 compared to 1990 levels. The 2040 target, which needs a sign-off from the European Union's member states and parliament, is a key milestone towards the bloc's goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2050. Brussels says the EU has already cut climate warming emissions by 37% relative to 1990. Died in Spain, 2 in France, and 2 in Italy as an early summer heatwave continued to grip much of Europe on Wednesday. This has triggered health alerts, forest fires, and forcing the closure of a nuclear reactor in a Swiss power plant. Spanish officials said a wildfire in Catalonia had killed 2 people a day earlier, and authorities reported heatwave-linked deaths also in Extremadura and Cordoba. France's energy minister reported 2 deaths linked to the heat, with 300 others taken to the hospital. Italy issued red alerts for 18 cities, while in Germany, temperatures were forecast to peak at 40 degrees Celsius in some areas, making it the hottest day of the year.
La majorité des Français a évidemment les bons réflexes, mais on peut toujours se faire piéger. On a plus de 300 personnes qui ont été prises en charge en urgence par les pompiers et 2 décédés à la suite de malaises liés à la chaleur. Donc ce rôle de prendre soin de soi et prendre soin des autres est important.
Pope Leo XIV has received Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni in a private audience at the Apostolic Palace on Wednesday morning. This visit marked their first official meeting following Meloni's return from the NATO summit in The Hague, which focused on military spending. The Pope has also held multiple meetings that day, including with Cardinals Luis Antonio Tagle and Paul-Emil Sherig, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic bishops, and Emin Erdogan, wife of the Turkish president. Following her audience with the Pope, Meloni met with Cardinal Secretary of State Piero Parolin and Archbishop Paul Richard Gallagher. According to the Vatican, talks have highlighted strong Vatican-Italy allies and ties, a shared commitment to peace in Ukraine and the Middle East, humanitarian aid in Gaza, and other bilateral and societal matters. In the meantime, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova has called on the Azerbaijani side to take measures to return to the level of interstate relations. Azerbaijan and Russia are locked in an escalating diplomatic standoff that has underscored Moscow's weakening supremacy in the Caucasus, a strategic region where major powers are vying for influence. The downturn in relations started when an Azerbaijani Airlines passenger jet crash-landed near Akto, Kazakhstan, killing 38 of the 67 people on board in December 2024.
Силовой акции против филиала МИА «Россия сегодня» в Баку информационного агентства «Спутник Азербайджан». 30 июня были задержаны граждане Российской Федерации, руководитель филиала Игорь Картавых, его заместитель Евгений Белоусов. С российской стороны было озвучено требование незамедлительно освободить их из-под стражи, несмотря на это, как стало известно позже, давление на российское информационное агентство и на российских журналистов продолжает. Мы рассчитываем, что желающие испортить двусторонние отношения воздержатся от дальнейших провокационных шагов. Этих шагов уже было немало. Нужно отметить, что эти шаги наносят серьезный ущерб межгосударственным отношениям.
That's all on Beyond the Continent. Do remember that you can send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number on the screen. You can also follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. Watch us live on DSTV channel 422, GoTV channel 23, StarTimes channel 274, Arvo TV and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Lekon Onabanjo.